Welcome back to the Rookie Numbers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryson Shank. Alongside me are your co-hosts, Nathan Wilt, Peter Schaefer. This week is our exclusive fantasy football episode. We'll be breaking down the best and worst picks position by position. And stay tuned at the end for our biggest boom and bust prospects. This is episode 3. Let's get to it. We're without Trent tonight, again. A classic missed guy in these episodes now.
Yeah, I mean, he's going on like the IR at this point. It's getting a little ridiculous.
Pretty much. But he should be back next week. We'll see.
We pray.
Maybe not. So before we get started, we should mention that we play in a 10-man full PPR redraft league. So all of our takes, ADPs, and round projections are going to be based off that. So let's get right into it. We'll start off with the quarterbacks. You know, a position that people kind of value differently in fantasy. So I want to hear from you guys. How do you value quarterbacks first?
I see quarterbacks as the last need before the kicker and defense. Like, quarterbacks will score you the most points, but I don't feel there's a massive drop-off between each one. I mean, if you invest in one, you're going to get a good return. But if you wait till the later rounds, it doesn't hurt you. I see every quarterback strategy is valid. It's just a matter of what you feel like doing that year.
The way I feel, especially in a 10-man league, there's at least 10 very good fantasy quarterbacks, that you can get in fantasy football. And for that reason, I agree with you. I think besides kicker and defense, that's the last need I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, if you can end up with Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith at the end at like one of the last rounds, I mean, there's definitely a strategy in not taking one of the high-end guys to get an average guy in the bottom rounds.
Right. So the tier 1 of quarterbacks this year, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, and Jackson. The QB top 5, pretty much across every site, all getting picked in the first 3 rounds. Do you guys like this?
No. I'll tell you what. The website I was looking on earlier had Patrick Mahomes as the 15th, I believe, overall pick, ADP. That's ridiculous. If you're taking a quarterback in the second round in fantasy football, what are you doing? I mean, I can't agree with that whatsoever. I mean, I guess if you're taking Lamar Jackson in like the 4th round, I can stand by it or whatever. But like, if you're taking a quarterback early, you have to get one of the elite guys, and you can't take a quarterback before like round 4.
Well, see, I don't hate it because Patrick Mahomes, I think, is overdrafted, but Patrick Mahomes is almost every year the highest point scorer in fantasy.
Without fail, pretty much.
Without fail. He really just kind of conquers it. So there is I think there's definitely reason in taking a quarterback very high. I don't really go for that strategy, so I don't really want to speak too much to that, but I don't really have a problem with taking like Josh Allen in the second round, especially if he falls to you in the later picks. I don't have a problem with that.
Right. I think for me, it's usually after the 3rd round. I'm going to be targeting guys like Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence this year in sort of the 4 to 6 rounds.
Yeah.
But like Nate, like you mentioned before, Geno Smith is going undrafted in some leagues.
Yeah.
In our league, in a 10-man with 13 picks, he could go undrafted. Same with Kirk, who's going to go in the later rounds.
Jared Goff.
Aaron Rodgers is going to go late in most drafts. And I think those are also going to be good investments pretty much any year.
I mean, the thing is, there's almost at least 3 or 4 people in your league at all times who are going to be taking a quarterback early.
Right.
So, there's very little times where you're going to have Mahomes drop, a significant amount, or, Jalen Hurts drop a significant amount. If they drop to you, it's almost a no-brainer to get them just because of the value that you can get at some of those positions and the advantage you can have over people in that position. I just don't see it as a necessity to have a great quarterback.
Yeah, and there is value taking a quarterback super early versus waiting super late. But if you are going to wait super late, I think you can really build off of people taking quarterbacks early.
Yeah.
Because that opens up a lot of possibilities for you in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds of your draft.
I think it's got to be almost a reaction thing to most of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a constant theme throughout this episode. A lot of our picks, a lot of our guys for each round and each draft position are based off reaction because, in my opinion, the most important thing in fantasy is just kind of having a feel for your draft.
Exactly.
You got to come in with a plan, but you got to be able to adapt.
Because almost
Yeah.
last year, I notoriously had a horrific draft, and I stuck to the plan. I reached for some guys. I invested a little bit too much in the Broncos country. Let's ride factory. Didn't go well for me. I think a plan is important. You should come in with an idea, but you shouldn't be set on that after the first 4 rounds. Like, you should be able to adjust what you're gonna do and be prepared for that.
Right. So before we wrap up our quarterbacks, I just want each of you guys to give me just a quarterback that you like at their ADP. I'll start. I'm going with Trevor Lawrence. He's being taken in the 6th round, and I think he's going to be one of the top QBs this year. 6th round value for him is pretty incredible to me.
Yeah, I love that pick. In a lot of my mocks I've been doing, Trevor Lawrence has been the guy I've ended up getting. He always seems to find in a good spot for me where most of the people are planning to take a quarterback late or take a quarterback early. He's in that nice sweet spot where no one's going to reach for him. And you can just kind of wait for him to drift down the stream of the round, and you can just pick him whenever you're ready.
Right.
I love that pick.
Right.
My sleeper pick for quarterbacks is actually Anthony Richardson. This is not me predicting Anthony Richardson to be a good quarterback, just as Justin Fields is not a good quarterback, but an amazing fantasy quarterback.
The value is certainly there in Richardson.
At pick in the 10th round is when he goes. Anywhere in the 10th round he usually falls. But that's great, because this guy's like Cam Newton with Josh Allen's body. I mean, he's built. He's a freight train out there.
He is.
I really like his physical ability to just get yards. He's already named the week 1 starter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're moving forward with him in mind as the quarterback. Don't hate the options he has either. Like, he's not going to be good. I don't think he's going to be good his rookie year, but he's just going to be able to pile up the points.
Right, and the value's there. If you're going to draft Richardson, you have to go with Geno Smith, Jared Goff.
You most definitely need a backup, because this could blow up in your face. This is like a 50-50 of being like a top 10 quarterback in the league or a bottom 25-30 quarterback.
Right, but the value is there.
Yeah.
I really like Jared Goff. I really like Jared Goff. He's averaging pick 115.
Mm-hmm.
I also like Derek Carr, testing out a new offense. Got some really nice weapons. I think Derek Carr has always been a good quarterback. I think last year he just kind of fell apart. I mean...
Well, the Raiders were terrible last year.
The Raiders were awful.
They had a horrific head coach.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of injuries. There's nothing he could really do about that, in my opinion.
You were expecting him to take a leap with Devontae Adams, but he didn't take that leap. But I think Derek Carr is still that guy, and I think he's going to be pretty solid in New Orleans. So I think for sure my sleeper pick would be Jared Goff, but Derek Carr is also right there too.
I've never been a huge Derek Carr fan, but I like his ADP. I like that selection. Even with not liking Derek Carr as a quarterback, I like that take.
Yeah, pick 144.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to go undrafted in most leagues. So a guy you can certainly stream week by week.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be moving on to the running back position. Okay, come clap. 3, 2, 1. Moving on to the running back position. The running backs are a position with a lot of disparity in how people play it with their fantasy team. So, Peter, I want to hear from you first. How are you approaching your running back position for your fantasy team?
In fantasy football, especially PPR, you're looking for backs who can run and catch. And I'm also looking for, even more so than that, backs who are basically in the backfield of their own. They aren't going to be, splitting carries with hardly anyone else.
Yeah.
Guys like Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Jonathan Taylor, just to name a few. I mean, you get a lot of those type of guys out there, but specifically, one guy I'm actually staying away from is going to be Christian McCaffrey. He's injury prone, and the stats before and after Elijah Mitchell got hurt really shows that if Elijah Mitchell is healthy, it's going to take away from Christian McCaffrey's production. But aside from Christian McCaffrey, I do like a lot of running backs this year.
Personally, I don't like a lot of the mid-round. I was talking maybe low third, 35 to 70, 65 maybe. I don't like a lot of running backs in that range. My strategy going into this year is if it's available, I've picked 7 in this league, so I gotta wait to see what happens in front of me. I might get 1, maybe 2 good running backs in the first 3 rounds. Then I'm gonna sit on my hands when it comes to these running backs. I just don't find a lot of value in picking a running back in there when there's just so much variant and just if between Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, Stevenson, Elliott, like all these guys who have all these different running backs in the backfield. I don't really know if that's what I want to gamble on.
For me, this year, I think the hero running back strategy is going to be very important. For those of you who don't know what that is where you just pretty much gamble on one high upside, top-tier running back, like a Bijan Robinson or a Nick Chubb, and kind of fill out your running backs later in the draft with higher upside, sleeper guys. I think that's going to be really important this year. Nate, like you mentioned, there's a lot of guys in like that 35 to 70 range that aren't cutting it for me. Like you mentioned, the mid-tier running backs this year, I'm trying to stay away from. So I think drafting, a Bijan Robinson or a Tony Pollard early is definitely the way to go this year in the draft.
I definitely want a Cadillac and then a fleet of minivans. Like I want a headliner guy, and then I just want a few low-key guys who are gonna get you where you need to be, but they aren't gonna be the guy. They're not gonna be the guy you rely on each week to get you basic points.
Right. Now, I want to hear from you guys. How do you feel about the zero running back strategy this year? Going for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or a Kenneth Walker, and that being your RB1 this season.
I really like it if you have a late pick, like around the turn, like a 9, maybe an 8. I love it a lot. But if you have a high-end pick, you need to take Eckler, Bijan, Barkley, Chubb. Any of those guys, I think, that's where I would be taking them. Mm-hmm. And then you can do a hero running back or running back heavy. But I think it really depends on your pick and how other people around you are picking.
I don't love it simply because it seems to me like this year in fantasy, the running back depth of how good they are drops off a lot sooner compared to the receivers. I think that you could use that strategy for receivers, but I think as far as running backs go, I don't love that strategy.
Well, I think if your league set up like this, you like 2 running backs, a flex, maybe 2 flexes, 5 bench spots. If you're doing 0 running back this season, you need almost 5 or 6 running backs on the roster. Because you can get guys like Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, like all these dudes who could theoretically take over their backfields and be, end as top 15 running backs, but it's not going to be every single one of them. Like you have to take some shots. Yeah. Like there's going to be some times in your draft you look back and you're like, what was I thinking? Like there's going to be some guys that just don't pan out. That's why I think you need to roster a lot of running backs this year for 0
Now,
running
the
back.
downside with that is that's a lot of roster spots to have for running backs. Especially this year, I think there's a lot of depth at receiver and tight end too. Now, I do say this every year, but I think the tight end position is very deep.
Yeah.
As well as the receiver position. So I don't know if I want to hold 6 running backs this year.
The thing is, like, ideally, you're going to have wide receivers or tight end that you can just play every week. Like, sure, they have a bye you might need to lose maybe 1 week. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have these guys in the first maybe 5-6 weeks that are going to be there. And once you see how some of these running back rooms pan out, you can get rid of the wasted picks. I really like it, but you just need to pick the right guys.
Right.
It's a gamble.
So I want to end off the running back position, just talking about some of our favorite guys at their current ADPs. I'll start us out. I really love Nick Chubb this year at pick 12, right around that turn there for the first and second round. Without Kareem Hunt, I think Nick Chubb can average 25 points per game. And I'm not joking. He was a 20-point per game scorer with Kareem Hunt, and we saw Hunt get a lot of the receiving work in Cleveland. And it's not that Chubb is not a great receiver, but I think he can fill that hole very well.
Yeah,
for the Browns.
I don't know if he'll get a lot of receiving reps just because I don't believe in him, and I don't think Stefanski does either. Mm-hmm. But I really like Chubb. The only one concern, is his durability. I think the wheels might fall off. I think he might have a thigh thing that bugs him the whole year. Needs to put a metal plate in his foot or whatever. Who knows? Anything could happen. But on paper, he might have the most upside of any running back this year with the
Absolutely.
highest floor.
Right. I think honestly could be the RB1 overall.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah. For me, as far as ADP goes, I'm loving Alexander Madison.
Okay.
Who is he? Who else is in that backfield in Minnesota? Dalvin Cook is gone. Who is Alexander Madison going to be splitting shares with? I don't know. He's at what I'm looking at, Fantasy Pros. He's ADP 57. That seems great to me for
Mhm.
Alexander
Yeah.
Madison.
Yeah,
I mean-
without Cook, Madison was very efficient.
Absolutely.
About a 17, 18 point per game scorer over the past 2 seasons without Cook. Now, there are questions, the backfield is his own, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So there's questions, how will he be as an RB1? Because without Cook, it was a fairly small sample size. So we'll see. With a backfield of his own, he definitely could be a guy that
Yeah.
could be an RB2 in fantasy for you.
The only
Yeah.
reason you would not pick him or like that ADP is if you just have doubts in his ability. I don't, but I can see the reason to doubt him. That would be the only reason that you would not want to pick him up.
Right.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna throw some names out there because these are not high profile guys.
Sure.
I like David Montgomery
Okay.
for the Lions. Jameer Gibbs, I think, is going to be a stud, but I don't think he's going to get the red zone opportunities that David Montgomery is going to steal from him.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that Jamal Williams type situation. I like Rashad Penny and Khalil Herbert, and I apologize in advance because I won't pronounce this right. Devon Achane, Dolphins rookie running back. And the reason I like all these guys is someone's got to take the carries.
Mhm.
Someone's got to handle the football for the running back position for these
Right.
teams. And I really like these 3 guys, their skill sets in particular. So I think you could pick up maybe 1 or 2 of these guys, and they might end up being one of your go-to guys.
All right, moving on to the wide receiver position. This is my favorite position group this year. I think there's a ton of depth at the receiver. And for me, in my draft strategy, I'm going to load up on wide receivers this year. There's a lot of guys that I think are going to get you 11 to 12 points per game, especially in the later rounds. And there's a lot of guys in the first 3 to 4 rounds that can be 15 point per game scorers if need be.
I definitely can agree. I think the plan for me this year, at least, is to take receivers early and often. There's at least 1 or 2 guys per round the entire way through that I think could end up being starters for at least one team in the league.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this wide receiver class in the NFL right now is so deep. You can get guys at great value who honestly have extremely high ceilings that can honestly save you some weeks.
Yeah, I think especially, guys like Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, going in the 2nd and 3rd round of drafts is honestly a steal in my opinion. You got Chris Olave down there, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. These are guys that any given week can break out for 20-plus points. And getting those type of guys in the 3rd, 4th round is pretty rare for any position.
Now, let me tell you something. Since the Jaguars have been eliminated from the playoffs, that day, I've been high on Calvin Ridley. I've watched that Jaguars team, and I'm thinking to myself, there is absolutely no way that Trevor Lawrence does not give that man a monster season. Calvin Ridley, hey, he might be gambling on himself this year, and I wouldn't blame him.
Yeah, he can do everything Christian Kirk did and more, I think. Just an overall super skilled wide receiver that's going much later than I would personally take him in drafts. You can get him in the 4th, 5th round depending on how your league shapes out.
Mm-hmm.
A guy I'm absolutely going to be targeting this year.
Here's I'm an opposite. Now I don't view the same way as you do. I think Calvin Ridley, great talent in Atlanta. He's taken a year off from football to fight his demons. Demons are apparently fought. They're gone. He's in a new system. He might not be football ready week 1 because he took a year off from football. Not really working out. He's trying to figure out himself. He's soul searching. I don't love Calvin Ridley. I think they have receivers already who are quality receivers. Obviously a spot for him if he comes back to his old form. But I really don't want to gamble with the amount of depth that there is this year on a guy like Calvin Ridley.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're not taking Ridley where he's being drafted, you have plenty of other options.
Exactly.
Amari Cooper's right around there. DK Metcalf, who we'll get to later. DJ Moore, Christian Watson even.
I would much rather gamble on a guy like Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins just staying healthy over gambling on Calvin Ridley.
Strong take, because I know a lot of people are high on Ridley this year.
Yeah, I'm going to fade those people. I think, he comes back the same way he does from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
He's a stud. He might finish as a top 15, top 10 receiver. I just don't think that's very likely.
Moving on to the tight end position, Nate, I want to hear from you. What's your draft strategy with tight ends this year?
My draft strategy is to get the premium, the cream of the crop. I want a top 5 tight end, and if I get one, I will be very happy. If I get Kelsey, I'm going to be stoked. That's the biggest positional advantage you can get in the entire league.
Absolutely.
You have Travis Kelsey over Mark Andrews. That's like a 70-point in a season difference from the 1 to the 2.
Mm-hmm.
In the ADP. I don't know how they'll finish. I'm not a mind reader. But Travis Kelsey with the best quarterback in the league, Mark Andrews with a top 5 quarterback in the league, Hawkinson, Kirk's been, underrated his whole career. Kittle in a great system. Pitts doesn't really have a quarterback, but he's a talent. I really like the tight ends this year, and I want one of the best.
Yeah, for me, it's going to kind of be feeling it out in the draft. I think, and I say this every year, there's a lot of tight end depth this year in the draft. I like Kincaid later. I like Njoku, Freiermuth, and other guys there. But for me, it's going to kind of be feeling it out. If Andrews is available at a good price, I would love to go out and get a top tight end. Like you mentioned, positional advantage with tight end is huge. Because Andrews, Kelsey, Kittle, and Hawkinson are guys that are going to be at least 5 points a game above the guys below them.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a huge boost. But for me, I'm kind of feeling it out, just seeing what tight ends fall to me, when and where.
See, I'm fine with that strategy. There's just too many tight ends I don't want to take. There's
For
too
sure.
many tight ends that have question marks. I'm wearing the Freiermuth jersey. I love the guy. If I got him, I'd be very happy with my strategy. But if I don't get him, like Evan Ingram to repeat his incredible last season after not being able to catch a football, Darren Waller, who might tear his ACL 4 different times in the season, Dalton Schultz, he's been up and down his whole career. Cole Kmet, I don't know what Cole Kmet's deal is. All I know is people like him. I just don't get waiting for that tight end. I want to go out and get a good tight end.
Sure.
That's fair. Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, you want to get one of those top guys because I in my opinion, I see a drop-off from Dallas Goedert to Evan Ingram, which is where they kind of separate in the ADPs. You want to get one of the top guys because, as you were saying, there's a big difference in the points per game system when you get from, point guy A to guy B. I mean, you got to make the right pick at tight end, and you should make it early.
I think
Right.
it's one of the only position groups that I'm just fine with a blanket reach.
Mhm.
Just go and get the guy you want. Around early, go ahead. 8 picks early, go ahead. 12, 15, get him. If that's your guy, you got to get him because it's just such an advantage over a guy who's not going to have a good year.
I don't hate that take if you're talking about a top 5 to 6 tight end.
Yeah.
But after George Kittle, for me, I don't like reaching for a tight end because after you get past George Kittle, you get into your Kyle Pitts, your Darren Wallers, Dallas Goederts. I think there's not much of a drop-off between Dallas Goedert this year and taking a reach on Freiermuth or, like I said, Kincaid in later rounds.
Well, you got to play it by what's happening around you, but I mean, if I'm sitting at 52 and Pitts, Goddard, or Waller is still available, I'm getting one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what the situation is. I'm getting one of them.
Sure.
I'm at in the 70s, and I get my pick of the litter of Ingram, Freiermuth, or Njoku. I'm getting the guy I want because it's such an advantage getting the guy you think is going to be the best out of that group of tight ends.
Yeah, it's just to me, after you get to Kittle, it's just marginal point differences between a lot of those guys. So, as I mentioned before, it's a position where I'm just going to feel it out throughout my draft, and that's what I would recommend to anybody drafting tight ends this year.
I would recommend reaching. Get the guy you want. Don't listen to this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
I'm not going to go with either of those, and I'm going to say look for Darren Waller because if he stays healthy, Daniel Jones is throwing the ball to literally no one aside from his running back. Darren Waller could be a very, very good pick if he can just stay healthy.
I hate that for two reasons. One, he's not going to stay healthy. He hasn't stayed healthy since 3 years ago. Second, Daniel Jones isn't a good quarterback. I don't care who he has to throw to, he can't throw the ball.
I'm just saying, right? If he can take his team to the playoffs with the help of Coach Dable, I'm not saying he didn't get any help from Coach Dable because he definitely did. But if Daniel Jones can be the quarterback at the helm under that Giants offense with that receiving core that is awful, without even a good tight end, he gets Darren Waller. I think he's going to connect well with Darren Waller just because he still really has no receivers to throw to.
I'm hearing a lot of ifs, and I don't like that in fantasy. I don't like if this guy stays healthy, if this happens, if this happens. Darren Waller over the past 2 seasons just hasn't been that good in fantasy. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. He hasn't been able to put up points with a bad quarterback on a bad offense. I don't see why that would change in New York.
Now, I might be a little jaded to this topic because I drank the Darren Waller Kool-Aid. I picked him on the last year he was really relevant. Fantastic pick. Was phenomenal the whole year. Picked him the next 2 years. Complete bust. I couldn't rely on him to play over guys I drafted in like the 10th, 11th round. Like I was playing Freiermuth as like rookie year over Darren Waller some weeks. I just couldn't trust him. And
Sure.
I just don't want to trust him again. And I don't want to trust him in not even, objectively. It's just be a worse offense overall. I don't want to trust him again.
Before we end today's episode, I want to move on to some of our sleeper and bust picks this season. I'm going to start us off with one of my sleeper picks. My sleeper pick is Khalil Herbert. Before the preseason, the Bears' running back room seemed kind of up in the air, but in their first preseason game, Herbert played minimal snaps, which is a great sign. And when he was in the game, he did shine. He finished with 4 carries for 15 yards and a 56-yard receiving touchdown. Last year, great without Montgomery. And as the Bears' RB1, I think at an ADP of 107, he has RB2 potential for a team.
I talked about that a little bit in the running back segment. I love that selection. I think he has great upside to be a guy you're going to pick and, past 10 to be like a 7th or 6th level player. 7th and 6th round level player.
Yeah, I think like you had mentioned earlier, Montgomery might get some more of the goal line work. But overall, I think Khalil Herbert's actually kind of a safe pick later in your rounds.
Yeah, I like the pick.
My sleeper pick this year is James Cook. That man, I already had, a lot of faith in him before I saw Nyheim Hines was out for the year. I believe it was Nyheim Hines. Correct me if I was wrong. But it was.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. He was going to be the running back one in that offense, even without Nyheim Hines. He was going to be the running back too, but now that he's out of there, it seems like this offense is designed for James Cook to really operate the running game. Now, he's going to be splitting carries with Josh Allen. We know he's a running quarterback, and he's a good receiving back too. I think even though they're a pass-heavy offense, I still think James Cook is going to be a really, really solid sleeper pick in fantasy football this year.
Yeah, James Cook is kind of hit or miss for me. Last year, I thought he was going to be solid. He wasn't. It'll be interesting to see how they work him into the running game and the receiving game. I think you're right. Without Hines, he could be really solid. Damian Harris is still in that offense, which worries me slightly. But James Cook, not a bad selection for his late round ADP.
I mean, James Cook, I think he's talented. I don't really know. I haven't seen it on the football field yet. It's just Bills running backs scare me.
Right.
Bills running backs are very terrifying to me. And that is really my main concern is I just don't know if he's going to break that, that running back cold streak they've got going on. My sleeper pick this year is Deontay Johnson, going at number 81. Now, last year, no touchdowns. But he had, I believe it was 95 receptions. 95 receptions, just below 1,000 yards. It was a statistical anomaly that he did not get in the end zone. He gets in the end zone 3 times. He could be wide receiver 30, wide receiver 25, and I think with Kenny, majorly improved, mind you. I think he's going to be a great player this year. I really like Deontay Johnson this year.
I don't like that pick. I love the Steelers' offense this year. I am super high on the Steelers. However, I'm kind of fading all of their positional players this year in fantasy.
Oh, I agree. I don't like George Pickens that much. I think Pat Fryermuth's getting taken too high. I don't really like Najee's ADP. It's just Deontay Johnson. I believe in his talent. I believe in his workload. Each year he's been a significant target in their offense. Big Ben, Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph. He's performed. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. He's shown out. And pick 81 is disrespectful at this point.
Yeah, his ADP is solid, which is the only turn on for me for Deontay Johnson. However, his statistically anomaly season last year does raise some concerns for me. He didn't have a touchdown last year. What makes it better this year?
Well, he's just gonna get touchdown.
He's just gonna get touchdowns.
They didn't have a passing touchdown. The Pittsburgh Steelers did not have a passing touchdown till after their bye week. They had a bye week in like week 8, week 9, week 10, that range. It wasn't just Deontay Johnson. It was George Pickens. It was Najee Harris. These guys didn't get passing touchdowns. Pat Fryermuth had like 1. They just didn't pass the ball into the end zone. It's different. I'm telling you right now, it's different.
I'll be real. I did not know that stat, and that's really sad.
No, they had, I believe I saw the stat the other day. They were the worst team, number 32, by 3 yards and average yards per touchdown. Like on the play to get the touchdown, they were the worst team in the league.
Wow.
That's Pittsburgh Steelers football, though.
Moving on to our bust players of the year, I'm going to start us off. I think Najee Harris is going to be a huge bust this year. ADP 30 is way too high for someone who only averaged 13 points per game last season. He's playing on a much improved offense, as we had just mentioned, and I don't think he'll see the touches he got 2 years ago. I think Jaylen Warren, especially, is going to see a lot more time in both the run game and maybe slightly the passing game. And with an upgraded receiving group, I just don't think Najee will see the targets there either.
In our last segment, I just touched on don't like his ADP.
Right.
And, I think Warren, they found, great player. I really like him as a talent. And, Matt Canada, all Steelers fans know, he loves that jet sweep. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he's getting every carry. And, pick 50, I think is a good spot for him. But he's going 20 picks higher than I would take him at.
Right.
My bust for this year in fantasy football is DeAndre Swift. He's going to be splitting carries with Rashad Penny, who, by the way, is an absolute workhorse and one of the most underappreciated running backs in football right now.
If he's healthy.
If he's healthy. And Kenny Gainwell, who is a really, really, really solid option in the receiving game. So he's going to be taking away targets from him, and Rashad Penny is going to be taking rushes away from him.
Yeah, there was a lot of reports coming out recently about Gainwell gaining momentum as the RB1 in the Eagles' offense. And to me, as an Eagles fan, RB1 in the Eagles' offense means a bunch of different things. No matter what, whoever has that title, it's going to be a committee. So it's gonna depend on how Swift kind of plays out. I think Swift will be a very game-by-game type of player. His ADP isn't terrible, but I think, you're going to get 15 from him 1 week and then 8 the next week.
And, I think I've said this about 100 times today. Guy's a great talent. I just don't know the situation he's in is just going to lend itself to fantasy football.
Yeah. Right. As you mentioned, Gainwell, I think, is going to get a lot of the receiving work, and I don't think Swift is going to get a lot of goal line work. So it's hard for me to draft him with that going on.
It's a lot of, the point-heavy spots. It just seems like he's not going to get a lot of that.
Right.
One of my bust picks that I truly believe in this year is DK Metcalf. I think if DK Metcalf had Wes Welker's build, he might be going 9th round. I think it's all show for DK Metcalf this year. He's got to split touches with JSN and Tyler Lockett, who I think Tyler Lockett is a better receiver than DK Metcalf.
Great take.
I would probably want him on my team more than DK Metcalf. Obviously, I think Metcalf physically has more upside, but Lockett, year in and year out, plays more games and he scores more points. I don't like Metcalf at 32. I think you could find a lot better value for a wide receiver in the 5th round than Metcalf in the 3rd.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you mentioned, in that round, some of the other guys going are Amari Cooper. You got Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, even Calvin Ridley. And I don't think DK separates himself that much from those guys. And DK does pose a lot of risk in a receiving group with 3 receivers that are going to command targets.
If do me a favor, everyone out there, if you're thinking about picking DK Metcalf, just pick Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, or DJ Moore instead. For me, please just do that. All those receivers, I promise you, have more upside and are just overall better players.
Well, that'll do it for this week's episode. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening and on all of our socials at Rookie Numbers Co. Again, that's at Rookie Numbers Co. on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week.